Good day to all. Welcome to Extreme Recap. Three peasant brothers must fight human-eating witches in a massive troll to save the princess after she mysteriously vanishes. We'll talk about the movie's plot today. Ashland, an enchanted mountain that no one has ever walked on, has been the subject of a long-standing legend in Northern Europe. As indicated by legend, at the highest point of the slope carries on with a horrible savage known as the Mountain Ruler, who has been sleeping for many years and will possibly stir in the event that the princess finishes. One day before Christian's birthday, Prince Frederick of Denmark shows up to propose to her after 18 years of dating. What's more, ruler Eric sets up a party to praise the commitment. Yet, during the festival, Christian understands that he assumes he is superior to the others and rejects the proposition, escaping into the timberland so she will not need to wed him. At a far-off point in the realm, a youthful worker named Espen is strolling across an extension when he is run over by the princess and winds up falling into the frigid waters, stressed over the youthful. Kristen goes to the stream and is pulled by him, which completely drenches her clothes. Subsequent to getting dry, the two take a midday break and eat everything especially in the bag, but when he asks her where she's going, the girl says she has to keep going and leaves without even saying her name. The peasant returns home after the unexpected encounter, where he meets his older brothers, who were working while he was walking through the forest. There, they argue when the father arrives and asks if Espen brought the items he requested. In any case, since he was thumped into the waterway by Christian, Espen lost nearly everything in the water. They ate what didn't get wet while resting, unable to feed his family. The man asks the young man to be responsible and take care of the house while he takes pearl hunting and Pal, refusing to let Espen go with them. The young man goes to his cabin and starts a fire as soon as his father and brothers leave. By thinking it might be a troll like the one in the legend, as soon as it gets dark and the ground starts to shake suddenly as if something very heavy is near. Espen performs an epic fencing match by wielding the stick with which he is stirring the fire like a sword. In any case, while swinging the stick from one side to another, he winds up dropping a golden stone on the shade texture, lighting a fire that before long consumes the whole lodge. Frantic, the young fellow does all that to control the blazes, yet since he just has a can of water to extinguish the fire, Espen can simply watch his home burn to the ground. Kristen is riding at the same time when she notices that the ground is trembling more and more. This frightens her horse, who runs away in a panic and leaves Kristen alone to be carried away by the troll. The following morning especially, Ian's father gets back from his chase in a shock to see the express his home is in. However, he doesn't have opportunity and energy to contend with his child. Even though Frederick has seen the girl, he soon arrives at the cabin to ask for Christian, but Espen pretends not to know anything. As he presses his sword against the peasant's throat in an effort to persuade him, the prince quickly realizes that he is lying and rephrases the question. He is told about the mountain troll legend and offered a reward for his rescue by one of Frederick's men. The young man does not speak as a result of the princess being half the kingdom. Rather, it only gives his father hope that his house can be rebuilt. While stating that he is counting on Pal and Put to locate the princess and rebuild the hut for Espen, the man hands over the last coins he has left. He throws the young man out of the family, claiming that he is now all alone, and he begs him never to go back home. The young peasant begins to follow the brothers from a distance until Paul finds him and invites him to join them on their journey. Espen detects a messed up mirror and stops to show it to his siblings, placing the old thing in his sack and forging ahead with his way until unexpectedly they hear somebody calling for help. The youngest tree decides to stop to assist those leaving, while the other two continue on their own among the trees. The young man picks up the axe from the ground and begins to force the trunk, leaving an opening large enough for the strange creature to detach its enormous nose. Espen, guided by the voice, encounters an extremely bizarre creature with its nose stuck to the trunk of a tree. In an effort to assist, Espen encounters the creature. Finally, Liberty. When she learns that the Mountain King has taken the princess, the witch inquires as to what he is doing in the forest and celebrates, recommending Espen do the same as she turned to leave. However, the young fellow says he really wants the prize to revamp his cabin and inquires as to whether the animal can help him in any capacity as a method for expressing gratitude toward him for being saved. The witch says that an enchanted blade can enter the skin of the Lord of the Mountain, however that to find the item, he should go to a reviled swamp loaded with risks. She hands him a magical map that shows exactly where the sword is. Following the compass, the young man finds the princess's brooch inside a huge footprint and continues to walk in search of the sword, realizing that Espen is willing to do anything. When Pearl and Paul find a basket full of golden apples, they are completely lost and starving a few miles away. They eat every one of them without thinking. After they have finished eating, 3 girls come up to them and ask if they like it. They then invite them to their house and tell them that there are hundreds of fruits and a huge banquet for them to eat without having to worry. Further away, Espen begins to follow the sound as soon as he hears the brother laughing. But instead of finding a way through, finds itself stranded in front of a massive rock wall. The young fellow finds one of the apples on the ground and takes a decent chomp, uncovering a secret entry in the stones immediately, staying on the path. Espen goes to the feast with the girls after locating his brothers. However, after a while of not eating the apples, the young man realizes that the strawberries are actually a collection of worms and refuses to eat them, realizing that something is wrong. One of the ladies offers him an apple, and Espen acknowledges. But because he finds everything to be suspicious, he just pretends to eat the fruit and throws it away as soon as the girl is distracted. Following a couple of moments, the impact of the apple wears off and the deception is broken, uncovering that he and his siblings are in the refuge of the Timberland fairies. Strange-looking creatures that trick unsuspecting travelers into eating them outside. The fantasy. Espen is able to observe that his brothers are consuming rats and maggots. Additionally, he must free them before it is too late. He comes up to the 2 of them and asks them to take a quick tour of the area under the guise of getting to know their new home. However, as soon as he escapes the nymphs, the younger one informs them that they are trapped in an illusion and needs to leave as soon as possible. Pro clearly doesn't believe it, and Espen has no choice but to force his brothers to wake up, putting an end to the illusion by slapping them. One of the creatures appears behind them as soon as the 2 of them regain consciousness and invites them back to the banquet. But now that they can see how the monsters really look, they are startled and start running through the rock maze. Attempting to get themselves out after some time looking, the siblings arrive at the back entry and run with all that to circumvent, compelling the sprites to utilize their enchanted powers to close the exit. Despite this, they manage to escape and avoid becoming the forest witch's lunch. When they are finally free, the brothers resume walking. Additionally, Espen puts the wool ball back in his bag after finding it on the road, after walking a number of kilometers without stopping. Paul gets tired and decides to stop in the next town to make a feast at the tavern with the money his father gave him. While Espen and his brothers are making their orders, one of Frederick's men notices them and tells the prince so he can go over and talk to them. Yet, this time, offering a coin bag, the Danish nobleman takes a different approach. Assuming they give him some data that will assist with finding Christian when sees the cash. He decides to accept the offer and asks Espen for the map after realizing that it is more than enough to rebuild the house. But the young man doesn't want to, so he goes up to the prince and throws his boiling porridge bowl in Frederick's face. With this, confusion follows in the bar, and the siblings start to battle with the rulers, men breaking a mud container over the regal buffoons, head burnt out on messing about. Frederick draws his blade and goes to battle the worker, who, unarmed, attempts to dodge the blade. However, in the midst of the conflict, Espen is finally able to defend himself when the waitress decides to assist the young man and throws a huge rolling pin in his direction. During the fight, Frederick understands that he will not have the option to slice the wood and chooses to utilize the half-blade strategy to stagger his adversary by penetrating the roller and sending it taking off. However, fortunately for Pearl, the implement ends up hitting the fool on the head, who feigns almost immediately because Pal still requires assistance in joining his middle brother. They fight together as well. Heavy armament specialist, the most grounded individual from Frederick's military. However, even in 2 versus 1, they cannot defeat him without weapons. Espen fights with a huge steel spoon as he runs to the kitchen. The sovereign, moving on to the table where they start to trade blows. However, Frederick, who has been trained in fencing, is able to easily defeat the peasant by cornering him at the table. However, he ends up stepping on the plate of a massive man, who takes advantage of the gap by throwing him against the wall with all of his might. The 3 run through the forest after leaving the tavern. In any case, Frederick doesn't surrender and go on after them, cornering the triplet against the bluff, realizing that they will die, regardless of whether they hand over the guide. The siblings take a frantic measure and leap off the precipice, falling numerous meters before hitting the water. Pearl is furious after they leave the river, and he responds, it was the perfect opportunity for them to get the money and return home, when he asks Espen why he didn't hand over the map when he had the chance. But now, instead, they are entangled in the enemies of a prince, who claim that he must always do especially and that it would have been better if he hadn't been born. In's job. Which ultimately leads to a big fight and forces Pal to split them up. Perce declares that he will keep the map, and the younger one hands it over after the tempers have subsided. Espen finds a bearskin on the ground and decides to take it, saying that it could be useful for something, letting the older brother lead the group the rest of the way to the sword. However, Burr is unable to comprehend how it can claim that he is just a hoarding child by continuing on his way without speaking to him in the cave. Christian tries to pierce the troll's finger with a piece of bone as he waits for it to come closer, but the king of the mountain can only be hurt by the magic sword. Espen and the others finally approached the swamp and attempted to follow the maps and instructions, but the device does not appear to function properly in this location. The creature does not suffer any harm and is easily captured and returned to its hideout a few miles away, leaving the brothers alone to discover the magic blade. Espen tries to get loose while walking but gets his legs stuck in the mud. He lets the brothers go first. However, this is definitely not a smart thought, since a thick mist starts to frame in the marsh, making them neglect to focus on one another, despite the fact that Murmur can't see. He starts calling for his younger brother once he realizes that there is another person with them. Frederick, however, is the one who emerges from the mist. Who holds them both while Espen asks for them, oblivious to the fact that his brothers have been taken away. The youngest child decides to swim to the sword when he reaches the lake where it is. Be that as it may, when he enters the water, a few bizarre animals likewise make a plunge and swim toward the middle. When he sees the bog beasts, Espen drops his blade and attempts to move to the surface. But the creatures that drag him to the lake's bottom completely surround him. The young man swims back to shore after defeating the creatures with his Excalibur after just a few seconds underwater, resembling the new King Arthur, who has already emerged from the swamp. While on the lookout for his brothers, Espen takes advantage of the opportunity to practice using his sword on a tree, successfully severing the wooden trunk. The young man decides to use the bearskin to chase Frederick and his men away after finding Per and friends tied to a tree a few meters ahead. But he runs toward the gunner in the dim light, hits him without realizing it, knocking him to the ground and blowing his cover. Frederick says that he will take the three of them to the mountain and use them as bait for the troll while he saves Christian. He also says that he will kill her once he becomes king because the troll only hunts at night. While the brothers are starving, the prince decides to set up camp and prepares a delicious meal. Unexpectedly, the ground starts to shake, similarly as the day Christian was removed. Furthermore, Espen rapidly understands that the savage is coming, but Pro picks up a rock with his feet and throws it at especially because they are tied to a tree close by, who figures out how to cut the rope off without a moment to spare before the savage tears the tree down. Frantic, the siblings run erratically through the woodland, leaving the mountain lord toward the path where Frederick and his men are stowing away weak. To hide, the prince climbs to the top of a tree and flees, leaving his soldiers to be trampled by the troll. The last man standing suddenly appears and declares that he will never leave his prince. Be that as it may, when the ruler of the mountain draws near, Frederick kicks his assistant's hand and wrecks him from the highest point of the tree to occupy the animal. However, this timid attitude is ineffective. Additionally, he has taken away a nearby tree in total. Espen and his brothers wait for the troll to leave in an abandoned building, but the troll catches Pal and takes him to the lair in Frederick. When on top of the mountain, the Goliath beast leaves the two in a cavern and heads out to chase. Be that as it may, soon, they view as Christian inside, and the Danish aristocrat changes his mentality, boasting that he consented to being captured only to save her. Paul wakes up at that exact moment and reveals that everything is a lie and that Frederick plans to get rid of her after the wedding. This angers the nobleman, who turns his back on the princess and lets her kill him with a bone. Since she doesn't have any idea what Paul's identity is, the princess keeps her composure and asks him to introduce himself. She is reassured when she learns that he is related to Espen in the forest, that Pern, his younger brother, return to the camp to look for something useful, and that they were successful in finding the magic sword once more. In addition, they attached a swarm of fireflies to an empty honey pot to make a well-armed lamp. In order to save Paul, the two brothers set off up the mountain, using the woolen ball to direct the way back out of the cave. After getting lost for a while in the maze, they discover a location with a lot of human bones and friends. They are on the right track because their shoe fell to the ground. Following the passageways, Espen winds up falling into an opening in the ground where he is caught by the sheath of his sword. Pro tries to remove him. When Kristen and her friends hear them, they start calling for help, alarming the siblings that they are simply underneath exploiting the opening where he practically fell. Espen starts pulling Pal with a rope and prays for him to rise. Christian receives assistance shortly thereafter, and she is effortlessly extracted. Yet, when it is Frederick's chance to be protected, he puts forth no attempt to help. Even worse, when the troll returns to the cave, he starts making noise. The brothers manage to safely drag the prince out by following the troll's path to the exit, and by some miracle, the creature doesn't hear anything. This time, however, the troll is sleeping in the middle of the path, necessitating a jump over it for the group to avoid being noticed. Individually, they all leap over the snag without drawing in the animal's consideration. But as always, Frederick stumbles on the king of the mountain because he is completely useless and tells him about the escape of his prisoners. They rush to the exit in a panic and discover that it is dawn, which is good news for them, since the savage goes to stone on contact with daylight. Yet, since there are as yet a couple of moments until light, they should figure out how to remain alive. In the meantime, in an effort to disorient him, Her suggests that they flee to the forest. But Kristen thinks it's a good idea because she knows they'll be caught easily and suggests they go to the top of the mountain, claiming that the sun will rise earlier there. The gathering begins climbing the stones while the Trasco closely lags behind. Frederick, on the other hand, gets stuck on a single part, and Espen has to go back to help him or else he would have been caught by the creature. The man hides behind a rock after being saved, allowing the troll to pursue the others to the summit of the mountain. However, when they get there, the sun has not yet risen, so Espen takes up his sword and faces the creature directly. The peasant, full of bravery, dodges one hand and strikes the creature directly in the leg. The young man who is slapped by the goblin, who is still howling in pain and close to ripping off the beast's limb, while his sword is thrown down the hill, rendering him defenseless. But Pearl doesn't let his brother die on his own. Instead, he throws a rock at the monster's head, which causes it to attack again. Espen asks Christian and Paul to distract the troll while he grabs that broken mirror and uses the glass to direct the sunlight toward the monster with less than a minute until dawn, blinding it and making its body freeze as it attempts to smash the princess. With this, they are protected and can at last get back, leaving ruler Eric very glad to realize that his little girl is protected back home. When the monarch offers them a reward, Kristen tells him that Espen and his brothers saved her. However, the young men assert that they only require funds to rebuild their home and have no interest in half a kingdom. The king says that there will be no more marriages and that the princess can be with whomever she wants after granting their request, permitting her to remain single until she finds love. Espen leaves Kristen at the palace and returns home to meet his father, who accepts him back into the family and apologizes for what he said. In the end, the younger one hands over the money bag and says that it will be a long road before they finish rebuilding the hut. He then finally helps his father and brothers work in the fields after the troll died. Frederick goes down the mountain and searches for the way back to the realm. However, as he is unable to locate himself, he stops the creature with the enormous nose and requests a route to the castle. The only difference is that he does it in a disrespectful manner, taking his retaliation by pointing in the wrong direction and telling the prince to stop at the forest nymph's home. Turn on notifications, please subscribe for more videos like this, and like the channel to support it. Thank you very much for watching.